Not everyone can leave. Let's get just really blunt about it. Not everybody in a toxic relationship can leave. And if you're familiar with my story, and especially if you've been on TikTok, you know that I stayed for 2 years, but that's not unusual. There are people that I know who've been in these relationships for a very, very long time. There are a lot of things that make leaving super hard. Let's even just take a healthy relationship for a moment. Let's imagine that everything's going great between you and your partner. When do you know that leaving's enough, when it's the right thing? Well, what point do you pull the trigger? Because what it's going to mean is you usually have to uproot yourself or your partner. You're going to have to divide the assets. You've got children to consider. You're going to have to consider even what's going to impact to your family, impact to your friend social support system. It's going to maybe even impact if you can even stay in the area. It might even impact work and your relationship with work. And even if you can go to work or you need childcare, a lot of people who end up in a toxic relation for extremely complicated reasons end up in a position of vulnerability, a position of a lack of freedom and a lack of complete autonomy. I hear from people all the time who email me, who or message me, or leave comments about maybe they're infirmed, maybe they don't have the finances, maybe there's not the social support system. It even could be that there's the lack of cultural or religious support or even permission. There may not, I mean, I know in a lot of us on social media think that we like to believe that we have complete autonomy to make any kind of decisions that we want, but maybe there is a lack of that. Maybe your support system just frowns on it. Maybe you will be ostracized. I've heard of people who've actually been kicked out of churches for divorcing. I know for me, and if you've seen my series, my 29-part Gold Digger series on TikTok, then you know that for me the church played a huge role. And I had grown up hearing that marriage was the highest standard, and that a wife is there to support her husband, and that in fact, he's even at times even made, they talk about it's like sanctified. He's made more holy by her holiness. I mean, there's so much pressure put on women, right or wrong, fair or not fair, but that's the system that I grew up in. And I had made a personal commitment to myself that I wasn't going to divorce. I didn't want to be I didn't want to do that. It just didn't feel like an option to me. But I also know there are people who end up in maybe in a foreign culture. You're in a country, that certainly happened to me, where you can't speak the language, you don't have access to the same supports that you would have, other people would have. Maybe you're not even on the bank accounts, or you've not been privy to the bank accounts. Maybe you don't know what's in the bank account. There are so many reasons why people struggle leaving. It's interesting, and you can see it if you look at the comment section on the 29-part series, just how little support we give to victims. I know that I'm using that word actively. I'm not using the word survivor, but we don't respect people who stay. We act like, especially in the Western culture, we act like all options are always open all the time to everyone in an equal way, that there's no such thing as assets, resources, privilege, entitlement. There's no access to these types of things, which is completely unrealistic. That is not true at all. And all of us have different types of not only external resources, but we also may have different internal resources. So maybe you're in a position where you, for whatever reasons, you don't feel you could have the wherewithal or the strength to be able to go. Because here's the thing, we have to remember what we're talking about. We're talking about a narcissistically abusive person, whether they're a narcissist or a sociopath, whether they're a psychopath, or maybe they're just on the spectrum of narcissism. We're talking about a toxic person who views the world competitively, who doesn't have any allies. This person doesn't see anybody as safe, anybody as on their side. They have no loyalty to anyone but themselves. They view everything from the lens of who's winning and who's losing, and they intend to be the winner. We forget that that's the type of relationship these individuals are in. And a lot of these individuals who are like this, who are on this spectrum or have these conditions, or I'm sorry, disorders, they don't see this from the perspective of let's just divide things, or I want you to have the best life possible. So if you need to leave, please leave. No, they view this as you are abandoning them, you're rejecting them, and that in their mind, you have like, lit the signals. This is all on, game's on. And so everything that you've been experiencing abuse wise up to now is going to intensify to a new level, because this person, not only do they, even if they don't like you and they have contempt for you, maybe even they find you disgusting, there's no way they're going to be okay with you walking out. Absolutely no way. They want to make sure that they have annihilated you. This is going to be mass destruction of you, because they interpret it personally as a rejection of themselves. Even if they don't want you, they still interpret that as you rejecting them, and they intend then to make sure that you are decimated at the end of this. So leaving means you've activated that. And anyone who's been in one of these relationships know that's terrifying. It's terrifying to know that this person who you once really loved, you once had dreams and hopes and wishes for this relationship, to know that this individual now is going to go after you and make sure that not only do they get their fair share, which we are all entitled to. I am not one to say that that somebody's in the right and someone's in the wrong, but they're not even care about the fact that you get what you're entitled to. They want to walk out with everything they think that they're entitled to. And it is going to be way beyond normal sense of fairness, way beyond a normal sense of reasonableness. There is no reasonableness with someone like this. I think it's shocking for people who've not been in a relationship with somebody like this to understand the degree of craziness we're experiencing in these relationships. I know that many of you who've watched my 29-part series has felt like, why did I stay? Couldn't I see right away? The red flags were really waving. Yes, in fact, I said multiple times in that series that, and for those of you who are not know what I'm talking about, on TikTok over the weekend, I put out 29-part series called How I Met, Married, and Got Scammed by a Gold Digger. So if you're curious to that, you can go and watch the series and hear what happened to me. I know to the person from the outside, if I had every possible resource available to me, if I had a good support system, if I really had not been decimated as a widow and felt like my whole life had blown up, if I had really good friends around me and a solid church behind me, if I had, I was in therapy, believe it or not, I was in therapy the entire time. So I had a good therapist, but it wasn't enough. I didn't have enough grounding foundation under me. Oh, thank you so much for that gift. There was so much lacking in my life. I think people don't appreciate to the degree that I was just emotionally devastated. That losing Brad for me was coming home. For the first time in my life, I found home in him. And it wasn't perfect. He wasn't the easiest person to live with, but he loved me. And I felt like I had a foundation. And when he was diagnosed with terminal cancer, every day for 5.5 months, I wept, deep weeping, deep sobbing, deep fears over what this was going to do to me. It was so bad that one of the times I was in a car weeping in the YMCA parking lot, and all of a sudden I heard the window next to me, knock, 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 knock. And I look up startled, and there was a man throwing his badge. He was an off-duty police officer walking past, seeing me weeping in the car. And he says, ma'am. And I rolled my window down. Ma'am, he said, are you all right? You look like you're having a heart attack. I said, no, my husband's dying. I'm not dying. My husband's dying. My life is dying. And what's interesting about this is that predatory people look for that kind of vulnerability. They're looking for something in you when they meet you that they think says that you're susceptible. Are you in a new place? Are you away from home? Have you made a big transition? Are you, maybe some big moment in your life just happened. Maybe you lost a close friendship or a family member. Maybe you have a diagnosis yourself. Maybe you started a new job or something that just kind of happened in your life that really put you in a vulnerable place. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for somebody who's susceptible, but they're also looking for personality types. They're looking for people who are agreeable and conscientious, somebody who looks good on their arm, who's going to somehow elevate their status or bring assets to them. So they're looking for all these types of resources from us. And when we get into these relationships, then they also at the same time start to compete with us. So the minute in some way in their mind they have acquired you, and that's literally what they're doing, they're acquiring you. It's acquisition. You've been now a part of their possession. Then they begin to close ranks around you. They will then isolate you. They'll deliberately like run down your support system, make you feel bad for talking to a friend. They will tell you how jealous your relationships outside of them make them feel. They'll make it inconvenient for you to have maintain contact with family or friends. They'll supervise you. They won't leave you alone in the room when you take a call or when there's a visit. They'll do things that will kind of create this hovering, this monitoring system, so you don't feel the freedom to really be yourself and to pursue your own interests and to keep those relationships up. And then they use this hot and cold, it's called intermittent reinforcement. And they found that it's actually psychologically, it's the most addicting strategy psychologically, whether you're an animal or a person. It makes you very compelled to work harder for whatever it is that you're seeking. And what you're working harder for in this relationship is you're looking for their interest, their investment. The investment that you saw in the beginning during the love stage, you want that back. So you work really hard to get that back because you think maybe something's wrong in the relationship. Maybe you think maybe you're doing something wrong. Maybe you're not showing up in the same way because they say that. They'll even say things, and I know I'm not alone. I heard this, and I know other people hear this, like, I really miss the early days. Or do you remember what things were like before the kids were here? Or do you remember what it was like before we did whatever thing it was that you did that changed things? So you start to think, oh, it's the stage of the relationship. They're longing for this kind of honeymoon stage. You don't realize that what they're really saying is, I'm unhappy. This relationship is no longer an ideal situation, and I want it back because I have an unrealistic expectation of all relationships. I'm not actually invested in any relationship. I'm invested in the fantasy of a relationship, and I just want that fantasy back. But you think it's something wrong with you or something wrong with the relationship, so then you just keep working harder. So I don't want to lose focus about all of this because I really want to focus harder on surviving. And by the way, if those may not know, I wear reading glasses. So right now I can't read your comments. So I don't really know what you're saying, but I'm going to put my glasses on. And the last, I'll make sure to carve out 20 minutes and we can talk about what your questions might be for me. I know several of you have asked to join the live. I don't accept guests as to join the live. I don't know you. People accuse me of not having good boundaries. I have a good boundary. My boundary is on lives. You're not allowed to come on a live with me unless you've requested before this live to join me, and I know specifically what it is you're going to be talking about. Otherwise, I don't have guests on the live. So if you want to do that, please reach out because I always advertise these ahead so you know what the next topic's going to be. But I want to talk about if you're in these relationships and you can't leave. And I want to first of all say all of you, especially of you who've been watching what's been happening on that 29-part Gold Digger series, do not let the trolls and haters scare you. Do not own the shame for your toxic relationship. I want you to know that I know that you've been working hard to be as healthy as you possibly can and to survive a very difficult situation. That you have married a highly conflictual person. In fact, I think I heard Dr. Ramani say this. I think this is where it came from, which I love. So I'm going to quote her or quote something close to her. This is one of those rare disorders, mental health disorders, where the person with the disorder is not the sufferer. It's everyone around this individual who then suffers for this person's disorder. You are the person who's suffering for your partner's lack of ability to get help and their lack of ownership for what they're doing to you, to themselves, and to your family. So I please want you to hear me, that I understand that you didn't ask for this, you didn't know that you met somebody like this, that you got bamboozled, but you're a person of integrity. You're a person who is loyal. You're a person who sticks things out and is determined. And for whatever reason, you're a hardworking individual who maybe for whatever reasons doesn't really have the freedoms to be able to lead, at least right now. So I get it. I get it. I actually considered myself, what if I just stayed with this person as roommates? What if I just stopped all of my risk with this individual, stopped sharing my life in a way that exposed me to his lifestyle, and just tried to make the best of it? Actually, I knew what would happen. What would happen with the person I described, the gold digger that I had met, what would happen was he was going to bankrupt us. He was going to continue with a lavish lifestyle, with completely be unreasonable. We were way outspending our means at that period of time. It just wasn't feasible. He always was thinking of the next idea, the next business scheme that he wanted to launch, and he expected me to fund them one thing after another. And I knew that was I had run a successful private practice. I had been a landlord when I lived in Michigan. I had been very, very financially responsible until I met this person. And I knew this was just not feasible. There was no long-term good outcome to this, and that I couldn't do it with this person. And on top of it, who wants to be with somebody where you literally cannot trust anything they say or anything they're doing, and that you never know what the truth is? And I didn't want to stay with somebody like that. But I know that I had a unique position where I had a career, I had an education, I had children in adult sons living in Texas, and that did I want to go back and move in with them? No, I didn't. Would they be happy about it? No, they wouldn't have been happy about it. But it didn't mean that I couldn't do it if I needed to. If push comes to shove, I could do that. And I know that's not true for all of you. I really know that's not true. So I'm going to here's a list of reasons why some of us get stuck and we can't leave these toxic relationships. And I want you to know that I consider this a valid list. Please hear me. This is you do not need to owe anybody an explanation of why you're not leaving. I'm going to say that again because I consider that so important. I'm feeling choked up. You do not owe a single person a reason why you're staying. You staying because for your own reasons with yourself, and that is enough. I really want you to hear that. That is enough. Anybody from the outside, they can say whatever they want. They're not you. They're not living your life. They don't understand what you're going through. Please don't let all the naysayers, all the people who just don't get it, who then find your circumstances upsetting to them. That's the problem. They're failing to understand what you're going through. They're more concerned about the discomfort it creates for them. They're not paying attention to what you're going through and what you need. So here are some reasons. Sometimes we're too isolated from our social support system, and we don't have enough support to do the leaving. It's too hard to. Sometimes we're financially dependent, and we don't have the skills, the experience, or the education to be able to get the kind of job that we have. And oh, thank you. I love that. I'm your team. That's a sweet. I've never seen that one. I love that. Maybe there's a fear of retaliation, and this is a big one. There is a person that I know that I've met a couple years ago. Her ex still stalks her. She cannot break free of this guy. He stakes her out. He somehow still breaks into her house and bugs it. She finds proof of that. I mean, this person is dangerous. Sometimes the fear of retaliation is so high that we can't leave because we know that it puts our very life in jeopardy. You're thinking, but seriously, isn't the abuse worse? Really? You're willing to bet your life on that? And for some people, that's what they're doing. They'd be betting their life on that. Sometimes there's legal and custody issues that are just for the outside of us. It's not that simple, and we don't understand those ramifications. For some of us, there's just the cultural and societal pressure. I can't tell you. I mean, I know that the area that I lived in, the very conservative Christian area, they would say, yeah, but you're married. You know how God feels? God hates divorce. And if you guys follow, there's a woman called Flying Sister. I think Flying Sisterhood or something, Flying Free. I think that's what it's called, Flying Free. Natalie Hoffman's her name. She has a podcast targeted specifically to Christian women in abusive relationships. She got ostracized. Her church kicked her out for leaving her toxic partner. So some of us really, and think about it. If you're a person who's living in this embedded religious situation and your whole community is inside this organization, and you know that they are anti-divorce and they really side in reconciliation and they really believe that everybody can change, that, and with all things possible, with God all things are possible. And I'm not saying it's not. Please don't hear me. I'm not saying that. But we also know, let's get really realistic here. Narcissists aren't interested in changing. They don't consider themselves the problem. They consider you the problem. But here's the church stance as well. You just haven't had the right conversation. You just didn't have that, maybe you're nagging too much. Maybe you're not having enough fun in the bedroom. I mean, listen, I've heard it. And I've heard people who've had those conversations. So you know that if you leave, there's no sympathy for you. No one's going to help you. There's going to be no childcare. You're going to be pretty much the pariah of that community. Are you really ready to do that? Are you really possibly ready that you may have to move? I know somebody who's the smear cam is so successful on her, the smear campaign, that she basically felt like she had nothing and no one when it was all said and done. Are you really prepared to go completely alone? Some of it, that's just too much. Another reason is the stigma. And here's what I felt. I just listened to, I found a great podcast. I want to put out a shout out to Andrea on Adult Child podcast. I'm sure Andrea is not hearing this, but check her page out. Check her podcast. She does have a TikTok. I think she's also on YouTube. It's called Adult Child. It's specifically addressing trauma, childhood trauma, but includes narcissistic abuse. It also includes SA, as well as ACA, adult children of alcoholics, all that stuff. And she had this really fantastic, now I'm forgetting the point that I was going to make, but her podcast has been so wonderful, and I've been super impressed. What was I thinking about her? It had to do with, Stigma. She had an interview with Kenneth Adams about sex addictions, children of sex addicts. I thought that was fascinating, really interesting podcast. And that podcast had to do with the stigma. And that's what if you guys know, my book is Love You More. I don't know if you've ever paid attention to the subtitle. The subtitle's in red. You probably can't read it. It says The Harrowing Tales of Lies, Sex Addiction, and Double Cross. My partner is a massive, is beyond serial cheating. It's the month that we were gone, and I didn't put this in the 29-part series. The month that we were separated, he saw 17 partners in 3 weeks. And I asked him, and he said, yeah, that number sounded about right. 17 partners in a 3 to 4 week period. Insane. The amount of people I think he's been with are in the hundreds, if not thousands of partners. Sick. Just sick stuff. But what I found was, how do you talk about that? What do you say? I felt, and this is what she brought out, and he brought out, Kenneth Adams, as well as Andrea brought out in this podcast called Adult Child. It's called, and you go back, it's maybe a month and a half old, but it was really powerful. But in this podcast, they talk about the fact that the stigma is so severe that you can't talk about it. There's just no safety to talk about it. There's so much shame associated, and that the children of people who are acting out like that then own the shame. They own that burden, and I felt that. I felt, even though I was not the one acting out, I felt ashamed. I felt ashamed for him. I felt ashamed for being associated with him. I still feel shame that I've ever known him. I feel shame for telling you the number of partners he had in that 1 month period. I felt so broken, so paralyzed by his acting out, it drove me speechless. I mean, and so you may find that there's such stigma that you can't talk about what's going on behind closed doors, what you're encountering, because you know that people looking at you, just like what I got on that 29-part series, you get so much mud thrown at you for you being dumb, you staying, you being weak. I don't know how many people think I have low self-esteem. I'll tell you guys, I don't have low self-esteem. Anybody who's been on my live and knows me and been around me, I know confidently who I am. I had a 20-year plus practice. I had a waiting list of 6 weeks, guys. I'm not insecure. I know that I'm very intelligent. I know that I am a competent person, that I can do pretty much whatever I put my mind to. It wasn't a self-esteem problem. Now, did I want to be loved? Did I want to be chosen? Absolutely. I mean, I had some woundedness there, but that wasn't the whole thing that stuck me out. So somebody's saying, oh, just get better self-esteem. No, that's not what's going to fix this. We have to look at the whole picture here. It's way more complicated. It's all these things that I'm listing: isolation, financial dependence, or financial, for me, it was financial threat, fear of retaliation. Yeah, I really feared that I was going to be heavily retaliated against the legal issues. Definitely a lot of legal issues for me. Lack of access to resources. Yeah, he was monitoring me constantly. Then all the societal pressures. Yeah, I grew up in the church that says women don't leave, people don't leave. And then the stigma, there was tremendous stigma. And then the last one is, I think it's the last one, is, no, it's not the last one. Employment challenges for some of us. There's also immigration status for some of us when we're in this country and we're counting on the marriage is the reason why we're here. If we lose that connection, that marriage, we can't justify staying here. We've been building our life here. For me, that wasn't a big fear living in Mexico. My permanent residency status was firm. I know Mexico wasn't going to kick me out if I wasn't married, but I can tell you what was an obstacle for me in that relationship, and that was I didn't have command of the language. I couldn't walk into any business and then talk about the pros and cons. Like, say I need a new air conditioner. I couldn't talk about what is the energy saving ability on this particular air conditioner. I couldn't go to the doctor. I had to be really careful about what doctor I saw, made sure they had enough English for me to be able to describe that maybe I had stomach pain and where I had the stomach pain. Even walking in to pay my taxes was stressful, or for me to go, renew my driver's license or anything like that was really a lot of work, hard work. So when you're in these countries where language is a barrier and you don't have an interpreter who naturally lives with you, and you have to pay for someone every single time to go with you, and then can you trust the person that you're hiring? Can you trust that they're going to give you accurate information and tell you what's actually being said between you and the other person? There's no guarantee of that. So for me, that was a huge obstacle. I felt very much at a disadvantage. And can you imagine me trying to go to court, trying to take him to court to fight for my company back? And he has the advantage of the language. I do not. And I'm completely dependent on that I hired a good enough attorney. And how do I know I hired a good enough attorney when I can't understand what's being said? Do you see how many, when we start to dump victims and say, you're weak for not leaving, and we don't understand all these possible ramifications, we really miss the boat. All right, I'm realizing I'm spending a long time on this, and I want to really get to how to save yourself, how to emotionally, survive this very, very difficult situation. The last one, by the way, is children's welfare. That's a big reason, a lot of people stay, is that we end up feeling like if we leave, we're going to harm our kids, that they'll have to cope with this person alone. How can we, who can't cope with this individual, then expect them to do it alone without us? And who are you and I to say that that person's not exactly right, that it is going to be difficult for that child to cope alone with that parent? You don't know that. I don't know that. We're not there to be able to judge that. But so many of us are like, oh, but you know what? Everything says that when you leave, it's better for the kids because at least then they have half of you half of the time, and half of you, yeah, they have all of you half of the time, and you're healthier. Okay, yeah, that's a really big point. Very valid, very true. But you and I can't promise what's going on behind closed doors with that child, with that toxic parent alone. And you know how many, some of these parents don't stick around. They're flaky that way, but you have no guarantee, and you have no guarantee that child's safe. So these are the reasons why people don't leave. So what are you to do if you're one of these people who fits into this category? Okay, now this first one is set boundaries. And I want to say right off the top, everybody who ever says that boundaries is a problem is wrong. They're wrong. And I just got to hear somebody else say this, and I agree. I'm trying to remember who it was. It was somebody on TikTok. Boundaries to a narcissist is something to charge. They're going to challenge it, and they're going to break it. So I'm thinking the way to work around this, set boundaries for yourself. You're not setting boundaries with this individual. That won't work. If you say to them, hey, I'm not going to talk to you after 10, or we're not having big hot discussions about anything important after 10, they're going to bring up everything after 10. And then they won't talk to you about anything important until it's 10. They're going to deliberately sabotage you and make it so it doesn't work. Again, everybody will just leave. Yeah, but maybe you can't leave. Maybe you just have every single one of those items on that list is the reason why you can't leave. You can't leave. But what you can do is to set boundaries with yourself. You can say to yourself, you know what? When the big topics come up at 10, instead of saying to them, I'm not talking about hot topics after 10, you can say, this is really important. let's bring this up tomorrow, or I'll make a note of it and let's talk about it more. Now, there is a possibility they're not going to talk to you ever again about it, because how dare you take control, and how dare you suggest that you're not going to talk about it then. So I can't guarantee this will work, but I do think thinking about what you have control over and what you do, and doing those things for yourself, is really, really helpful. Maybe for you, it is, you're doing too much at home. Maybe you're making too many meals. Maybe you realize that you need extra help. Maybe it might mean you bring in more help for you so that you have the support you need. But you don't need to talk to your partner about that. You can find ways to bring in support with necessarily not making it a kind of like an antagonistic, challenging moment with them. Just, find a reason to say, hey, I took advantage of this opportunity. I think it's better for both of us, makes me more available to you, and makes things work a little bit better with the kids. I think we learn ways to sort of couch things in order for us to get what we need. I think that if you set your own limits, that's really what I'm saying. You set your own limits about what you're capable of. Quit chewing off so much because they want you to. Not only are they willing to, annihilate you for leaving, they're also willing to use you up like you're a milk container, squeeze you empty, and then throw you out. Oh, thank you so much. So they're very open to using you extensively like that. But be sensitive to not allowing yourself to be used. Start to think realistically about what you can and cannot do, and start to build in additional supports for yourself. Maybe there's some things you're just going to have to let go. Maybe it means the dishes don't get done every night. Maybe it means you live with a little messier house. But begin to think about, what is it that you need realistically? How can you set your own limits with yourself? And this one ties in right to it. It's better self-care. What often happens in these relationships is that they don't take care of us. There's not the kind of compassion. They don't slow down. They don't empathize. And a lot of us, when we get sick, it gets worse. But what you can do is you can increase your own self-care. I realized after I left that abusive relationship that in some ways I continued to abuse myself. I'd let myself go extremely hungry. I'd let myself get dehydrated. I would go way too long between exercising. I might not even get out of the house every day. I wasn't slowing. I was working myself to death, even though I was no longer in the relationship. And a lot of us get into that kind of mentality, that mode. We just keep pushing. Maybe for you to take a big hard look, how are you not showing yourself kindness? What do you need to start slowing down, doing less of? What maybe do you need to put into your life so that your health is primary? Because this is so important. You have to be, are you making appointments? Are you seeing the doctor? Are you seeing the dentist? It's so easy for us to do the tyranny of the crisis, because they push us from crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis, that we never stop to say, whoa, it's been a year or two since I've even seen the dentist for a cleaning. So begin to really include better self-care in your life, regardless of how they feel about it. It doesn't matter that they like it or don't like about it. Just really institute that for yourself. And here's one that's hard, but I'm going to try to describe it to you and then urge you to do it. I really want you to start practicing mindfulness. What is mindfulness? What does even that mean? I mean, everybody tosses it around like we all know what it means. But what it essentially is that you stop being judgmental towards yourself and you approach your inner thoughts and feelings with curiosity. So say, for example, you're feeling tense about something. Maybe you don't even know how you feel, you just know you feel tense. That means you'd say, like right now, I'm noticing my shoulders are uptight. For me to say, okay, so why might I be holding tension in my shoulders? What is going on with me that I'm feeling like edgy and I'm like doing this? And then I might say, okay, what's feelings go with that? Is it fear? Am I nervous? Am I stressed? So you approach your feelings with curiosity, with interest, not judgment. And then you begin to check in with yourself. Like if you're feeling scared about something, what are you feeling scared about? And why would it not be okay to feel fear about whatever it is that you're feeling? Maybe you're feeling super sad about something. Is that okay? Is that normal? Because here's the thing with living with narcissistic people. They don't have the internal structure to cope with their own emotional well-being. They're offloading all of that. They're not in touch with themselves. They're distracting themselves or disassociating or acting out. They're doing one of those, usually three things: dissociating, distracting, or acting out. They then don't like your emotions because that creates more emotional work. It triggers them, but it also means that you expect them to show up interpersonally, and you're looking for empathy or sympathy, and they are not equipped to do that. So when you show your emotions, you become present, they will gaslight you for it. They will diminish you. They will invalidate you. They will basically give you a stop feeling, because I don't want to deal with the inconvenience. I don't want my own feelings, and I definitely don't want to deal with your feelings. But what happens when we live in these types of environment for a long time, we start to then not listen to our own feelings. So start to pay attention, but instead of judging yourself, you're human. All our feelings are normal. To me, feeling is essentially like the warning light on a car. It tells you it's not you, but it's telling information about you. So feelings aren't facts, they're information. So if you're feeling fear, where are you feeling out of control? Chances are fear is an indication of either risk or out of control. If you're feeling angry, what needs to change? What part of you is being hurt that you're not listening to? If you're feeling sad, what are you losing? What feels like less than, and what feels gone? So pay attention to how you're feeling. If you're feeling ashamed, what about that feeling of shame are you feeling bad about? Because shame's an indication of I feel worthless. I'm not good. And again, that's not a bad in itself. That doesn't make it true. Just remember, I said feelings are not fact, they're information. What making you feel like something's bad about you that maybe could help you lead to more insight, more help? So pay attention to your feelings and consider meditation. Consider, like, I know I had a series on YouTube where I actually stopped and did mindfulness practices, grounding practices, like what 5 things do I see? What 4 things do I hear? What 3 things do I feel? Things like that, grounding. A friend of mine that I know that from our toxic-free relationship club, she always does this. She always says, the sky is blue, the grass is green, I know the truth. She grounds herself. She grounds herself in her environment and then goes from there. So use something that kind of like gets you back into your body. Another good one, this is an easy one. Go get a really hot washcloth, really hot, and then wash your face or wash your legs. Feels so wonderful. And it gets you back into your body and helping you to really feel like you are yourself again. Then consider journaling. And I know you guys hear this all the time, and I know I've talked about the research. The research is powerful. Journaling does an incredible thing because it engages in our brain in a new way with the old material. We need to reprocess what we're going through. We need a safe place to sort of vent, but there's a whole variety, really creative ways that we can journal. Maybe you need to journal the facts. You don't need to journal about your day. You don't need to journal about your feelings. Maybe you just want to say, this is what's true, and then write down what's true. Maybe you need a journal to keep a timeline, so you just feel like you're not crazy. Maybe you need to keep a journal of new revelations of myself, but be creative with it. It doesn't have to be, oh, this is what happened, and this is what was said, and this is how I feel about it. Do whatever it is that you want to do with the journaling, so it makes you feel like that you feel healthier and more checked in and stuff like that. And educate yourself. I'm thrilled that you're here spending time with me. You guys know that every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, I come on and I give basically a lecture. And I want to teach you all these different aspects of narcissistic abuse, about how to help yourself, how to understand what you're going through, what's going through the mind of these individuals. This is just one of the many ways you can also, I just did a video on TikTok of all my favorite books, all the books that I found to me that were so valuable in helping me. So continue to really keep yourself educated. It's so important. And then here's a really key piece, guys, really key piece. Make sure you have a good support system. A narcissistic person is going to have demolished your support system, or they're going to make the support system everybody that's their friend or their sycophant, but nobody that's yours. Make sure that you really start to bring in people, who are your cheerleaders. Make sure they're people who are safe, that aren't judgmental, who are not going to make you feel bad, who are not going to like roll their eyes and leave, have a huge sigh like, you're still with that guy, or you're still with that woman. You want someone that really like understands. If you can't find somebody, consider my Toxic Free Relationship Club. There's a community portion with the chat. There's also, we do weekly group lives every week. So make sure you do not go alone. And then I want you to, here's now what to do with the individual. Okay, so here's the harder part of all of this. And that is, I want you to emotionally distance yourself from your partner. Yes, you heard me right. You have to stop seeing this person as the integral part of your buddy system. They are not your person. They have never been your person. I want you to start realizing that this person is only a team of one, and that's themselves. So I realized I had to stop caring about their opinion. I had to stop valuing and looking for his approval. I had to stop hoping that he'll notice that I exist or even checking in with me. I realized I had to start going around him and looking for other people to do that. This is going to be really hard. And it may mean for some of us, okay, for me, I'll tell you what it would have meant. It would have meant the cheating went more wild. He would have gotten worse, and I would have had to be okay with that. And that's a really hard pill for some of us. Maybe for you, it means your partner is going to act out more. Maybe there's more of the addictive behavior, whatever the addictive behavior might be. Maybe it might mean they're spending more money, or they're gambling more, or they're making really crazy decisions because you've been acting like the thumb. You've been keeping the thumb on them. I know that, but it doesn't change the fact that you need to really limit your access and really limit the way in which you're looking to this person for input and help and love and care. They're not going to give it to you. They're not equipped. I saw a fascinating research. I need to find it again. It came out just recently, I think, where they looked at the brains of a narcissist, and it really didn't matter whether or not you had a little bit of symptoms, some mild symptoms, or you had a pretty severe list of symptoms, that their brain is essentially different. It operates differently. And regardless of the symptom severity, the difference was the same. This still was a different brain. This person's not capable of giving you empathy or sympathy. They're not your team. They're not your person. So really start to pull yourself back emotionally from this person. And I want you to begin to focus on more creative outlets for yourself. Maybe there's some hobby that you haven't picked up that you should have, or that you would love to learn. Maybe there's a group that you can join. Maybe there's a meetup that you've noticed that just really has fascinated you. Maybe you want to learn a new language or travel some. I want you to start to build your own life separate from this person and really pursue the things that allow you new outlets and go into new directions. And will they like it? Absolutely, they won't like it. I know they won't like it, but do we care that they don't like it? As long as it doesn't endanger you, I want to encourage you to continue to do that. And I want you to really focus on your long-term goals. These are the ways that we can survive a toxic relation. We can survive something that's less than helpful for us. I want you, though, here's some final tips to help you that I want you to really think about. I want you to acknowledge the reality that you're in a toxic relationship and it's not going to get better. And I know that means giving up on hope. And a lot of us stay because we keep thinking things will get changed and things will get better. I also want you to really reframe the way you see things about this relationship so that it becomes less confusing. And I also want you to begin to really focus on self-worth and how you can protect your own personal boundaries better. I want you to reduce your emotional investment in this person and really develop emotional independence for yourself. I know, and here's the bigger one. I want you to get better at identifying and resisting triggers. When they say something that you know is deliberately said to upset you, I want you to get to the place through therapy, through support, through your friends, that it becomes something that's not impactful. You know they know where your hot spots are. I want you then to make these less of a hot spot. And I just want you to continue to get more knowledge so that you understand who you are and where you're going. Now, some final feedback, and then I'll start taking your questions. The final comment is, I want to warn you, if you're able to do all of this really, really well, chances are they may leave you. I want to warn you, because what we know about family systems theory is when you change a piece of the system, then everything changes. So when you start to become different and healthier, they don't like it. Here's how it happened in my relationship. As I started getting ready to leave and I was starting to think about having a life of my own and realizing this has been impacting me very much physically, I started to diet and exercise really regularly. And I started losing weight. He noticed, so he started bringing in more snacks in the house, my favorite snacks. He'd make sure to buy them. He'd see that, I'd make sure I saw him buying it, and he was hoping to sabotage it. He sabotaged me. He even mentioned the fact that my legs were getting thinner, and I could tell that was threatening to him. You will change the system by you getting better. So expect sabotage by your partner because they don't want you getting better. You being psychologically ill and feeling frightened and feeling shaken by this person, they then have more power over you. It keeps them in control. They want you diminished. They want you unhealthy. They want you scared. They want you off balance. So you doing all of these things that I'm telling you to do, then that's scary for them. I suspect, for those of you that heard the story, my story, that when I left that phone out on that countertop for him, for him to find that next morning, and I looked at him and I said, I know, I felt a shift. There was a shift in me, but there was a shift in the relationship dynamics. I think he knew, shoot, she's gotten strong. She's now not so controllable. And if you remember, that it was the very next day he was packing and leaving. He left. He knew that it was up. Not only had he been found out, but he also knew he was losing control. They're not interested in that. So I want to warn you that doing all of this may lead to them leaving. Can't promise it. Maybe you don't want that, but I just want to warn you that you getting better is going to have some ramifications. All right, thank you guys so much for listening to all of this. Next week, I want to talk about next week, and I'll start taking your questions. Next week, I won't be going live on Facebook or TikTok. I may go live on YouTube. I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and act like I am, but I might not. I'm going to be on vacation, so I really need to take a week off. I've been working so hard. I'm trying to get ready for the group coaching program that's launching in August. We still have spots. Lisa, Sunny, and I have spots. If you like help healing, I really would love you to urge you to think about the Healing Strong. It's a 12-week live group coaching program. Starts in August 22nd, and September 5th is the second group. We have spots in both groups. We're also launching a new Powerful You, how to spot and avoid predatory people, how to spot the red flags, how to get out of the tricky situations, how to say no, how all the things that make, what do you do when you have a boundary they're not respecting? All this information is in the link in my bio. And if it's not, if like in YouTube, I always try to put it in my show notes, but a good place to find it is to go to my website. My website's kerrymcavoyphd.com. That's a great way to find most of the stuff I've got going on. All right, questions for me. Somebody said to me, this sounds like they didn't like what I was saying. They said, why are you not just telling people get divorced? Yeah, well, because you missed the first part. Divorce is not always feasible. I spent half an hour talking about why divorce is not always feasible. So unfortunately, yeah, in an ideal world, like I said, if equity and power was equal and resources were accessible to everybody, and we all had great family systems, and there was no stigma, and we always got behind people and we supported them financially, then yeah, okay, that would make sense. But it's not always feasible for all of us. And I also want you guys to hear, again, I really want you to hear me again and say, no shame to anyone who stays. No shame at all. We need to start to make that a viable option. We don't all have the freedoms to leave. Yeah, so Jacqueline, I said it took Jacqueline 7 months, and she had to find a new roommate to stop the cycle. That's a great idea, Jacqueline. That leaving stage is so tough because we end up having this big gap in our life. And I love the idea that you found a roommate. That's really, really awesome. What a creative idea. And Abihan, so good to see you. I always love see my subscribers. It means a lot to me, guys, when you are a subscriber. We're told not to argue or fight with a narcissist or sociopath. So if there's essay involved, would you suggest not reporting it to prevent a fight? No, I wouldn't suggest that. In fact, as an obligated reporter, if I ever heard of it, I would have to report it on your behalf. Obviously, that's not the case here, but I want to let you know that I don't think when there's essay involved, we really do need to step in because by law, we need to report that for the victim to keep people safe. And I know that you're very concerned about not wanting to instigate a fight, but that's a fight definitely worth having. Very much so. How do you spot toxic people when they just show interest, but they're really actively pursuing you? I think anybody who doesn't see your reluctance or take no, anybody who sort of pushes you, that's a good warning sign. This is a person who can't hear no, who's going to have to be the one who's in control. So I would make sure that you hear that, you see that that's a disrespect of you. And I think that's the part that was really hard for me, was to see interest as disrespect, intense interest, pushy interest as disrespect. I didn't see that. I saw that as flattering. It's not flattering. It's actually obsessive or enmeshed. It's not psychologically healthy. That took me a lot of time to make that connection. And we don't teach our children that. I mean, how many of you guys have been teaching your kids, hey, somebody who's obsessed with you is actually disrespecting your right to yourself, your autonomy, your privacy? I know I didn't hear that. So I would see that as a concern, as a red flag these days. Yeah, do I think sexual coercion happens in marriage? Absolutely. I do think, Kimberly, it does happen, and I think that that's abuse. I think when both partners don't have the full freedom to say no, that you've lost your autonomy in that relationship, and it's no longer about you and what you need, and it's really then very, very controlling. So yeah, I think that's and so what have you done? You said it's been happening. That's tough, because usually people like that pout. They play a good victim role when they don't get their way. They'll say, oh, I can't focus on work, and it's what makes me feel loved, and I'm having a bad day. They'll really lay on the guilt. It really makes it hard to stand up under that. And then for me, it's also a desire killer. Who wants to have a relationship with somebody where you're always afraid you're going to be compelled the next time, and then you end up feeling like you're that because you did this time because you actually felt close or connected, then now they're going to say, oh, now how can I weaponize that against you the next time? So it just puts you in this nasty, nasty cycle. It's really hard. Yeah, victim mode. Victim mode is the favorite of a lot of narcissists. It really is. It's not just the covert narcissist who plays the victim. Anybody who's narcissistic really feels like he's entitled. They're entitled. Not he. They entitled. They really feel like life's unfair. They're jealous. At their root cause, if you look at the diagnostic manual, the root cause of a lot of their feelings is not just shame. It's also jealousy as well. So he thinks he's all good for doing it. That's wild. Yeah, it's sad. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you're going through that. He says that if I leave, he's going to take his life. Is this real or just manipulation? Well, it may be a bit of both, Story Girl. Stora Girl, actually, that's what your handle is, Stora Girl. It may be both. He may actually do really something drastic. I'm not for sure he intends it to be, to have that outcome, but it certainly is also manipulation. That's a big one. Here's a technique to use to get through it. I suggest that you say to this individual who's threatening to harm themselves if you leave, for you to say to them, if I hear that you're going to harm yourself and I think the threat's real, I'm calling the emergency service on you. And they can then assess you and determine if you're at risk. But I'm not taking responsibility personally for your health and your well-being. That's a really great, they don't want that. They don't want the sheriff department showing up. They don't want the EMS there. They're going to be turned off by that. And also what you're saying is you're essentially saying this manipulation strategy is not going to work. Yeah. So sometimes they don't follow through, but sometimes they do. And about the time I tell you, most of the time it's just manipulation. Yours will do it. I once had a client do that, never told me he was suicidal, and he then did something and then called me after the fact when it didn't work. And I felt that I couldn't trust him. I felt like we're obviously not a good collaborative team if that's the way he's utilizing the service. He's not utilizing it the way he should. I felt like, it kind of essentially broke the frame of treatment. So you did that. You called the emergency service, and then it was my mess to clean up according to him. Oh, interesting. Wow. So what was the mess that you had to clean up according to your partner? Yeah. Obi Han said their partner did the same, and that was all lies and denial. And this person turned out to be a sociopath. Yeah, sometimes this is just a ploy. So how do you get to a point where you're done and you're really done? Giggles, that's a great question. I call it breaking. And I get this quote from Dr. Ramani. I appreciate this because it's the best way to describe it. She calls it the breaking the shelf moment. The breaking the shelf moment. It's not one thing. Even if you guys listen to my story, he cheated many times. I had lots of proof. Not for sure proof. That was my problem. I wanted to walk in on him. Or I wanted to really catch something. Yeah, I had it during the break, but then when he's back together with me, I didn't have it again. I didn't know he was still cheating. Yes, he was still cheating, but I didn't know that he was still cheating. I didn't have proof. I wanted proof. I didn't have proof. So everybody's like, well, Yeah, I know that he cheated. I know that he'd been cheating while we dated and while we were engaged, but I didn't know I didn't know he'd been cheating in the marriage. I didn't have, I had proof he was certainly, I didn't even really have proof that he was watching porn outside the honeymoon when I confronted him. I had proof he texted occasionally, but he was really good at hiding his proof, his evidence. I think that's what people missed in the series, is that he was really hiding that he was actively cheating. I didn't have proof that he was. Only during the break, which I could see that. He, in his mind, thought we were getting divorced. So I can see how he could justify, well, we already had like a little like pretend divorce paper. We were splitting stuff. He could say, we said, I want a divorce. You asked me, I want a divorce. So technically, am I not free to do whatever I want? Okay, some people would say, yeah, I guess maybe you do. I don't. To me, it's not until the paper is signed by the judge are you divorced. But anyway, so I didn't really have proof of that. But back to the breaking shelf moment. I'm getting off on my story. I would say it's when you had enough. And it may be whatever enough for you is. I don't know what it's going to be. For me, it was that way on the end when we were in Barbados and we were at the last Airbnb, and he was like beating into me like, you never think. That's your problem. You just don't think. That to me was the breaking shelf moment. I'm done. I would never be okay with this, with my kids being treated like this. Why am I okay with me being treated like that? So that was that for me, but it's different for all of us. And that, yeah, that's a great question. How do you ignore the emotional pull? Because they're very good at that pull. He would write me, even after we broke up. I mean, we're moving towards a divorce. I'm so depressed. I can't get out of. Now, do I believe him? No, I don't believe him. I'm sure he was not in bed. I'm sure he was up to lots of no good stuff. But they're so good at laying it on. That's again what people don't understand, is that they're yes, giggles. They're masterminds. They have spent their entire life being manipulative and exploitative. You and I have not. And generally when people say that to us in real life with real relationships who are healthy people, they need help. So when we hear it, it activates us thinking that we need to help them. So for me, this is what helped me on the emotional pull. It really helped me to recognize that this wasn't authentic, that I don't really actually know what this person feels. I just know that they're very used to manipulating, and they're not honest about who they actually are. And when I started to see through the like, why does this person say this? What is it they want out of me? When I started to make those connections, and I was less emotionally manipulated by it. Am I really over him? Oh, yes, Michelle. I am so over him. He disgusts me. I don't hate him, because actually, you guys, the opposite of love is not hatred. It's apathy. I forget he exists. I truly do. Until I had to retell this story. I have other reasons why I'm retelling this story right now. It's that made it important for me to do this. But outside of when I retell it or get into the book, yeah, I'm remembering a lot. You can even tell today. Do I seem triggered to you? I'm not triggered. The story doesn't upset me anymore. It feels old. It feels like it happened a long time ago. I mean, it happened 6 to 5 years ago with the amount of time I've had. So because I wrote for 3 years. I wrote this story over and over and edited it and wrote it. I did 9 edits to the book, Love You More. So here's the actual full story. I didn't tell the full story in the 29 parts. If you want the full story, it's in Love You More. But I wrote this in a year, and then I edited it 9 more times for 2 more years. And so, by the end of it, I felt like I feel done. I don't know, people want to know where is he, what he's up to. For those of you, sorry, those who are on YouTube and Facebook. But Caesar at this point is living somewhere in Mexico. He wrote me in 2020 to say he was broke. So the amount of money I gave him should have lasted like 5 to 6, maybe permanently. If he had learned to live on the interest of it and had been really wise with it, he could have probably gone a long time on that money. He had quite a bit of money. So where he was living and moved to, it should have taken him a long time to spend it. But he wrote me a year later and said it was gone. I don't know if I believe him. That would be stupid to believe him. But I know, is he and Maria still together? I think so. I don't know. I don't ask. I don't really know. I don't really care. She deserves him, honestly. She can have him. He's not a safe person. So I feel sort of sorry for her, honestly. As much as she was in cahoots and the two of them were playing me, they were definitely playing me, both two of them. And I forgot, they even met up after we got married. I forgot to include that. They met up when we started going steady. They met up after we got engaged. They met up right after we got married. He left me their first full weekend away. We went away and for like overnight, like fast trip. That wasn't overnight. It was a weekend trip to Mexico when we officially got married at the courthouse. But that next weekend was 4th of July, and he ended up went to Chicago and met up with her and had a weekend with her. So every juncture of our relationship, they met up. Daddy-o, you know, I find it's fascinating you're here, Daddy-o. I really do. I think that maybe you need to just sort of get off my live because it's really a bother to you, not a bother to everyone else. Don't you love it, guys? I just want to make a statement about this, is that people who are not good people, who are predatory, they hate it when we talk about the truth. They hate that I'm helping you know there's nothing wrong with you and that you are wonderful and that your story is important and that healing, part of the healing process is telling our stories. It's an essential piece. I just finished this really great book. I don't know if it's here, but it's written by Jennifer Freed called Betrayal Blindness. She ends the whole back of her book by saying the importance of healing is telling our story. And so that when we shame victims, we are essentially saying, it's really the toxic people who are saying, you're not allowed to have a voice, because when we don't educate each other and help each other get out, then we're not setting each other free. Then the person who's trapped, who's losing all the connection to everybody around them, and they end up feeling like there's something wrong with them, they end up then feeling like something's wrong with them, and they then can't get free. We then keep them trapped. So it's essential that these stories get out. And here's what's important about my story. I'm a psychologist. I'm a psychologist, guys, and this happened to me. After 20 years of therapy, I still got duped. I know a lot of psychologists and therapists who come to me privately and say to me, it happened to me too. If psychologists and attorneys and judges and doctors, people who should know, don't see the toxicity of this, if this is how good these predatory people are, then no wonder you're getting caught. No wonder this is happening to you. I ended up thinking if there was roughly, if we even use the statistics, and I do need to wrap it up here in a few minutes, if we use the statistics by government, roughly 5 to 7% of the population is narcissistic. That's roughly, once upon a time, if you take 300 million adults, divide by 7%, if you take that and then you times it by, they have a minimum of 10 relationships. You add their children, their parents, their partners, their friends, people at work, minimum of 10. Do you know how many people that is? 160 to 180 million victims. 160 to 180 million victims. So when we have people like Daddy-o who ends up saying, you just need to get over it. You need to shut up and stop talking. You are really dumb. You had a poor self-esteem. What we're essentially doing is saying that talking about this is not okay. We increase the stigma. And remember what I said, what keeps people stuck? I said social stigma. So when we do this, we're increasing the social stigma, making it not okay to talk about, and then we're paralyzing people from getting free. So do I like getting shit thrown at me for staying as long, for not seeing the red flags, for trusting someone to think that they are who they say they are? Yeah, that's what I did. I trusted them to say that what the person I met in the beginning was who they said they were. So the next class for Healing Strong is August 22nd, and then the other one is September 5th. They're two separate classes. They start and they go for 12 weeks. It's an amazing experience. Lisa, Sunny, and I both co-lead that. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm glad actually Daddy-o joined the live. I'm glad he was here briefly for us to talk about, and so you could see a little bit of the hate that happens on those videos. And I really don't want you to own that. I'm happy to take it for you because I don't want you to own it. You are not dumb for staying. You are not weak. You do not have poor self-esteem. You're not stupid. You're not, it's not your fault that the red flags weren't honest or obvious. I have another question for you. I want to kind of wrap this up on this point. Let's talk about red flags for a moment. I heard a really great point that I want to start to implement myself. I don't think so much as that we need to get better at spotting red flags because they're just very hard to see. They're extremely hard to see. And what may be a red flag for you really is not a red flag for somebody else. I mean, all the time we end up talking about, like, oh, who's paying for the date, or how fast do you rush intimacy, and who's talking about moving in together. Really? I mean, if you're like two adults and you really find someone you're compatible with, and there's a lot of things that are lining up, we tend to move faster than we are when we're at 19. It's just not going to have the same pace. So I think that's silly. And even somebody wanted to use my story as a way to say why no kissing for 3 months is the way to go. Okay, let's ask yourself this. This is why no kissing for 3 months wouldn't have worked. Anybody who tells me that I rushed intimacy, by the way, I didn't rush it, he rushed it, but anyone who tells me it's because I got too intimate too fast with this guy has missed the big picture. What was my guy after? The money. He asked me on the first date about me being a widow. He found fast afterwards, that I'd come into a life insurance policy. Do you think me not having sex with him for the whole period of time we were dating he would have cared? No, he wouldn't have cared. He was getting it elsewhere. He never was looking to me for that. So do you think no kissing for 3 months would have saved me? No, it wouldn't have. And do you think he could have hid all his worst? He did. He hid his worst parts really, really great for a long time. It wasn't until I got to the honeymoon, 2 months into the marriage, that the mask came off. So I know we want to save ourselves. I know we wish spotting these people were obvious. They're not. What we need to get better at, and this is what I didn't do. This is where my error was. My gut, and I didn't even know what it picked up on. There was something that just didn't set right. There's something I felt like niggling in the back of my head that was bothering me, and that was saying there was something wrong. And I didn't pick that up really well. I felt it, and that's why I even hired the professional private eye. I hired a private eye to look into his background, but I didn't pay attention to it because I didn't know it meant something. Now I know if something just doesn't feel like it's adding up right, or something's just kind of feeling off, I need to really listen to my gut instinct and pay attention and skedaddle. That's what I missed. It wasn't the red flags. It wasn't, how fast did he gaslight me? He actually didn't gaslight me for a long time. How fast did he criticize me? No, he really actually didn't criticize me much either. Did he, well, the texting was weird, but there's lots of reasons why texting could be weird. Maybe he didn't have any Wi-Fi in his manufacturing where he was supervising. Maybe in the dead center of it, there's no cell service. I mean, I don't know. There's lots of reasons. But what I didn't pay attention to was just that I was uneasy. I didn't feel at peace. And it was that lack of peace that was really the thing that I didn't pay attention to. All right, you guys, it's amazing. I'm so glad that you're here. Please, I'd love to have you follow me if you're new to my platform. I know a lot of you found me through the FYP page on this story, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions. I'd be happy to talk about it more if you guys want more of that. And I go live every week at Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. And next week I won't be, but because I'm on vacation, but I'll be back. And then when I come back, we're going to be talking about probably mediation and legal stuff. We'll probably get into that. And so I usually have it planned out. Watch for my events. I do plan this out so that you can see what the next topic is. But I usually, for those who don't know, I'm by the way, I'm a Ph.D. in clinical psychology. I usually spend the first half an hour, 45 minutes teaching. I love to teach. I think it's so important to have more information. All right, you guys, love you. All the best to you, and I'll see you when I get back on the vacation. All right, bye-bye.